would like to talk about something that I spend a lot of time doing in policy, things that make my hair fall out faster than it should. And that is the fact that our government structure is based on systems how it used to be. So what Sina and Sophie talked about, that the analog communication systems where you have a media authority and a telco authority, but also other parts of our government, like we have a business authority and a health authority. When it comes to big tech, they have influence in so many different areas, right? So they have in media, business, health, all these things. And this blur the lines or erode the boundaries that we talked about before. And as a regulator, as a government official, this makes it extremely difficult to figure out who exactly has jurisdiction, because we're always dealing with these complex problems, right? So I spent a lot of time figuring that out. And one way to solve this is through cooperation between authorities on a national level. But that's easier said than done, at the least. And I think if we don't prioritize cooperation, we risk two main things. So the one thing is that we risk stepping into the area of jurisdiction of another authority. And we don't want to do that. First of all, they get very angry. And second of all, these structures have been put in place by elected officials. So we want to respect that. But it can be very difficult. Like even for me to participate today, Helle, we wrote together about this, that when I was about to figure out if I could join, because I was invited, I had to write to other parts of government to ask them if they were okay with it. So I was like, I'm invited to attend, can I do it? And they said, will you talk about critical infrastructure? And I said, no, okay, then go ask another ministry and another ministry. So I had been all the way around government, I feel like, in order to participate, which is so nice that I can actually be here. But that's a really difficult thing. That's a really difficult thing. Another example from my own life is when it comes to internet cookies. So the cookies that Sina and Sophie talked about, I don't need to go through them again because they said it better than I could. But cookies are regulated in EU by something called the e-privacy directive. Now, the Ministry for Digital Government is responsible for the Danish implementation of that directive. So that's what we're doing. Now, this directive is closely related to another piece of regulation that you may know. It's called the GDPR. And that's another authority. That's the Data Protection Authority and the Ministry of Justice. So already there, we have to have good cooperation. Now, 2024, a new cool kid enters the block, Digital Markets Act, that will also have an impact on the use of cookies because it regulates cookies from these tech giants or gatekeepers, as is known in the DMA. That's a third authority. That's a Competition and Consumer Council, or Competition and Consumer Authority. So just about cookies, which seems kind of trivial and a small thing, we have three rule sets, three organizations or authorities that have to work together. And then you can expand that to all the other areas that we're working with, whether it be health or business or competition or something else. So that's the first thing. We don't know who actually has jurisdiction, and we risk overstepping those boundaries. The second thing that we're risking is that if we're not cooperating, we don't know who might find use of the insights that we get ourselves from our work. And this is particularly important when it comes to some of the analytical work that is being done in the authorities. So coming back to my own work, we are also looking into websites and apps to look for tracking, look for third-party dependence. We are very much inspired by the work of Sophie and Sina, so you already know what kind of analysis that could look like. And in this case, we did an analysis last year of the 10,000 most popular Danish websites, and we found that 9 out of 10 of them used embedded Google services, which can be used for collecting data. 9 out of 10. For Facebook or Meta, it was 1 in 3. So it was pretty severe. Now, those insights are good for us in an enforcement context because we know which cookies we have to look for specifically when we are dealing with enforcement of the e-privacy directive. But it could also be relevant for other authorities. Like if you're working with media, we could use these insights to document the advertisement ecosystem on websites, because media, there's all this discussion about losing revenue due to the advertisement, online advertisement, which is dominated by big tech. There's also the prospect of looking into the difference of public sector websites and private websites if private websites are more dependent on content delivery networks and plugins from tech giants, even though, as seen as Sophie already proved, the public sector is also heavily reliant on them. And I can, from the work we've been doing, also verify that. So those are two big things. I want to say again for the insight part of sharing knowledge. We're all trying to deal, when I say we, I mean all the authorities, trying to approach these multi-billion corporations individually if there's not cooperation. So there's one authority going after them, there's another authority going after them, and sort of the power balance is not really fair. And to say the least, these tech corporations are not necessarily very willing to cooperate themselves. They're not willing to, and I can say this as a government official, that I think that there is room for improvement in that cooperation. I mean, it's not like they're going to quote Taylor Swift and say, "I'm the problem, it's me," because otherwise, that's not going to happen. So we have to approach them directly with the things that we are doing and document these things, and we have to be good at sharing that knowledge across the organization if you see the state as a whole. I don't know how much time I have left, but I will just round up with some food for thought that now we're here today because we have a lot of shared history, we have many of the same rules, societal values, and I'd like to say that we likely had some of the same experiences and challenges. So if there's something that I've experienced, there's likely that someone in Norway or Sweden or Iceland also have experienced it. And I think that a good reflection question could be whether collective efforts among us all, kind of like we're doing today, but specifically on the topic of national cooperation, could lead each individual Nordic country to have better cooperation internally. Because I would love to hear about how you have done in your countries regarding ensuring that the Data Protection Authority is communicating with the Business Authority, which is then communicating with, I don't know, the Health Authority when it comes to these complex challenges. And not trying to propose any official structure for cooperation, but just wanting to hear your thoughts about it. So that was my point.
I'm particularly happy to hear from a policymaker that you guys don't know about who has jurisdiction over what, because this is a problem we've had forever, and it's nice to see that you guys are having the similar problem. I'm not sure if that is going to help me sleep better at night, but at least it's something that we share. And I would like to start with Mari. I wonder if your experiences about this idea of cooperation, is this a challenge, and how do you think that we could increase more cooperation across the Nordic countries?
Well, I think all of us being here today can agree that this is a challenge. For me, at least, I didn't have to ask anyone to come here today. But I think the thing we have to realize is that digitalization, it is a cross-cutting issue, and it affects all of us, different sectors, and that really requires us to collaborate more than ever. And then it's not that easy, but at least we need to talk about it. And I will get back to that, but I would like first to step back a little bit and to reflect a bit about what I, coming from the media authority, think is the most important thing here. And our main concern is that global actors now is getting the control over the information space, and then the lack of democracy that follows from that. And we have social media and the search engines having the power to influence and shape opinions, among many things, by scraping personal data, building profiles, targeting content based on algorithms, and all those things that we all know about. And that makes some new risks that we have to face. And we have to work, I think, differently than we did before, and also to look how the different authorities work by ourselves, but also together. And I would like already now in this discussion to mention the Digital Services Act, DSA, because now for the first time we will have legal instruments regulating these global actors, and I think that is very important. And DSA will really require us to cooperate in new ways. It will force us to cooperate, and that is good and mostly welcome. But what is important, I think, is how we as states will implement the DSA, and how we then can work together. And I think then we have to do that on different levels. The national level between different authorities, and even though every country will have a coordinator, you won't find one authority being able to do the whole thing. So we will have different competent authorities that will have to work together. And I don't think that the lines here will be very strict. So in Norway now we still have not decided who will be the coordinator. And it's no secret that I think that it should be the Norwegian Media Authority, because I think it's really close up to the work we do. But if it's us or another one, we need to cooperate at least 3 or 4 authorities. And how we do that, I think, will be the success of how DSA will work. So I think that is very important. And of course, also at the Nordic level, it is important. We can get back to that. But maybe the most important will be for DSA at the European level, I think, how we really get this to function. So I think DSA will really be a question about how we work together, and it will be very interesting to see how we can get this to work.
Yeah, that's very important. You also mentioned about the power of these global actors. Also, Signe and Sophie mentioned it. Thijs mentioned it. Like, we know that there's this infusion of external tech giants into the media arena here, and I wonder, from your perspective, what are the best avenues for protecting independent media and freedom of expression in the Nordics from these global actors?
Well, that's a big and very important question. I think, first of all, we are very lucky in the Nordic countries having such a high level of press freedom and independent media. And I think we have really seen the importance of that these late years with the pandemic, with the different wars. We have really seen the importance of having independent media and media that we as citizens can trust when it comes to information. Also because both the pandemic and the wars have really increased disinformation, and now we have the artificial intelligence that makes it even easier to produce and distribute, and even more difficult for us as persons to tell what's true and not true. So that has really shown us the importance of independent media. At the same time, the global actors is a threat in many ways. We have seen that they take down independent content from independent media. They are competing in the ad market, lowering the income from the editorial media. So in this situation, both having good media support systems is very important to assure that we also in the future will have independent media. Also using the legal framework, the new legal framework that we are getting now, both with DSA and DMA and the Media Freedom Act, that will be important. So at least we really need to use the powers that we have. I think that's really important, and realizing that freedom of expression, freedom of media, independent media is not something to take for granted. Even in the Nordic countries, we need to realize that.
Yeah, and that's particularly important from the context of of our project and the idea of universality, especially here in the Nordics. But you raise a big problem, right? Like all these new different regulation. Not only there's a complexity in the market itself and the technology, but also on these regulations. So Filipa, we're talking about these, like the Digital Service Act, the Digital Markets Act, the Media Freedom Act, the AI Act, the Data Act, all of these frameworks that are going to come into effect. And I wonder whether you could reflect a little bit about how these might be affecting media regulation here in the Nordics.
It's a huge topic, and maybe I'm not the expert of everything, even though sometimes I think so. But I think that we are now talking, of course, of media policy. We've moved a little bit from the backbone of internet into what this really results in a specific policy area of communication, which is media policy. And when we talk media policy, we talk about editorial media. I think in the morning you were talking media policy more like communication policy. So of course you have to keep in mind what the subject is. And when we talk editorial media. When we talk about why we think that DSA is so important is, of course, because that is content regulation on platforms. And media policy is very, very much about some kind of content-based regulation, even if it's not only that. So the DSA, I think, might look very simple if you just take a glance. I mean, it says that illegal content should be taken down. I think we all agree with that, and we thought that that was done already. But I think that DSA is interesting in the way that it goes a bit further. It says that the companies also have to look at a risk assessment of their business models in view of the algorithm they use, the way they do business, and then they have to risk mitigate. And risk mitigation can be done by a code of conduct, which the media companies and others have been part of, which is sort of a self-regulatory scheme. So you have this kind of co-regulation with a self-regulatory part, but where the Commission has been very instrumental, and you have regulation. And all this will only come into force if we cooperate really closely. And it can be implemented in many different ways. I'm sure it will be. And it will all come down to the cooperation that we are able to do nationally. And nationally, I think the cooperation will be very much about understanding the underlying, the other acts, how to regulate data, etc., etc. We need to sort of cooperate between the media authority, the Post and Telecom authority, maybe the e-privacy, the people sort of taking care of that, the different authorities, in order to get this to work efficiently. And so we're, in a sense, forced to start cooperating nationally and I think it will take, to be efficient, I think it really takes another kind of work in the authorities. And then we are supposed to do this also on the European level, which will take a lot of time and effort, because cooperation is really simple to say, and we all agree. We shouldn't have sort of be so strict in our own domain. We should cooperate, but it takes time. Cooperation is meetings. It's setting aside a day to sit here and listen to really interesting things, but that are not pinpointing what exactly I do normally. So it's a lot of work. But I think also that the combination of this DSA and the other many acts that are coming in will be interesting. And I think that the cooperation that we have to set in force because of DSA will also spill over for a lot of other acts coming into force, that we all will also need this kind of cooperation to be efficient.
You brought up a very important point, that the editorial control and content, and some of the, especially when we look at these more global platforms, they're brandishing the idea of freedom of expression as an absolutist way, which basically means that they are allowing people to just flood the space with fake news and falsehoods. I wonder, from your perspective, how do we go about protecting media, but also the editorial control in the Nordics from these specific approaches?
Very difficult, of course. If we start with the content regulation of the platforms like DSA, I think the first answer from the Nordics was self-regulation, because we couldn't even imagine how regulation would look, a content regulation on platforms which are not under editorial control, but which are sort of, the point is that everyone should be able to speak out their minds and so on. So from a Swedish perspective, it was very much self-regulation. But then the next step was to say that, well, okay, but if we have self-regulation, the risk is that these platforms will, of course, self-regulate too much, and we will have a problem with freedom of speech in that sense. And I think, to me, the DSA is interesting in that way, because it tries to do something in between and tries to find the way there. I think for media policy, what will be also perhaps, or what I'm thinking right now actually at work about a little bit more the things that we discussed this morning. I mean, the backbone. If we say that media companies should have, and it's the basics of media companies, they should have editorial control of their content, then what does this mean when we have an extremely complex distribution communication system, where a normal media company cannot even know who is taking the content where the hubs are, who is in charge, and what happens along the very complex chain. And of course, in relation to the governance of public service broadcasting, that becomes interesting for me or for us as media policymakers, because we of course say that they have to have control of the content. And this is, of course, what you said in the morning, that the internet is kind of meta infrastructure, and we will have to, and also that we are moving from separate infrastructures for separate content or separate systems of distribution, to where we had very specific media infrastructures, to a joint internet, where we will have to look at that from the perspective of media policy, but also from other policy areas.
So I wonder if Elva, you can reflect on what do you see the main risks for independent media policies in the Nordics in the near future towards this arena?
Yes, I would say what Mari said, she could be speaking, on my behalf here as well. But I think in addition to that, I think there are maybe 2 points that I would like to take up. And one is, of course, what Mari mentioned, which is like the financing model of the media. And we know now already that Meta and Alphabet are getting more than 50% of the digital advertising revenues in the whole world. So that is a huge income source, of course, that is being taken away from the media. And this is, of course, heavily impacting the business models in the media. And not all countries are fortunate enough, like Norway, that people then just subscribe to media and they're willing to do that. In Iceland, for example, we don't have a lot of models like that. So the money that is going to the big infrastructure is just going away from media, which means that especially like investigative journalism is suffering, because that's very time consuming and it's very costly. And I think it's impacting in a way maybe small countries faster, because there was not that many media corporations, and we don't have any of these big corporations like Schibsted, who are like in maybe many countries, and they have like a large revenue source with a much bigger population. And I think also, just as like has been mentioned, I mean, it is very difficult to separate the infrastructure of the big tech companies from the context. And what they have doing, and what we heard also this morning, is that they are just like increasing their layers, and they are getting bigger, and they are like small monopolies. And if we look at also how are the media companies going to compete with that? We know that the business model is to harvest our personal information. We also know that they have now grouped us into 52,000 different personality traits, you know, these billions of users, which means that this is extremely detailed information that they have to micro-target or, you know, whatever that they decide to do. So this is quite evident that no media house in the Nordics can compete with something like this. So this would be my first point. The other point that I would like to mention is that we haven't really started to talk about well, I mean, there are, of course, a lot of opportunities with AI, but we as media directors like Mari and I, who also have converged media authorities where we're also dealing with media and information literacy, this is not only a question of regulation. I mean, we have to inform people and so forth. And in a report that I saw from Europol, it is expected that 90% of the content on the internet will be AI generated in 2026. 90% in 2 years. So this is the pace that at least our police agencies are thinking that we are going forward. And what is this content? This is going to be a lot of rubbish, a lot of noise online, of course, but it's also going to be a lot of malign disinformation, maybe coming from foreign states. A lot of this is going to decrease trust. It's going to increase polarization, create a society where we don't really know what to believe anymore, with the deep fakes and so on. And we see this also, for example, in prior to elections. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see what is happening this year. There are more than 2 billion people who are going to vote this year. We have at least 56 different elections going on in the world. And this is going to be the year where we have like AI technology that is so ripe that you can make a lot of challenges, if we say it mildly. And what is this going to, how is this going to impact, of course, the media houses? One of the discussions that we haven't taken, at least in Iceland, maybe you have done that in the Nordics, but this is, we need more resources. This means that we need more fact checking. We are not like allocating the money. So we have business models for with decreased revenues for the media. And at the same time, we need more resources just to deal with the avalanche of disinformation that is going to be coming upon us. So these are maybe like the two main points that I would like to say. Maybe just finally one point. Last night I saw that there was a very interesting article in Foreign Affairs just published about the disinformation, where they were just talking about how the polarization in the US is creating a situation where there is just, you can't get a policy around disinformation and about the big tech companies. So we are now in the Nordics talking here about how we are going to have our policy framework when we are actually relying, according to this article at least, on a country where all these, where they are in this jurisdiction, which is so broken because of the polarization that this is going to have, of course, negative impacts on all of us.
That's a very important point, and you mentioned a little bit about like how difficult it is to kind of fight back against these big American companies, and normally when we think about this from our perspective, we tend to think like, how can small countries like Sweden and Norway fight back against these big companies? But I assume I can only imagine what you mentioned about Iceland, right? Like, so I wonder from your perspective, what would Iceland look into this cooperation with the Nordics, how that would look in order to fight back to these big companies?
Well, I think that especially, and I think Signe said that already. I mean, of course, the smaller populations in the Nordics, we are very dependent on a good cooperation, both within the Nordics and also in Europe. And one thing that I also wanted to mention is that we don't even have a contact person in Greenland or Faroe Islands or Iceland. So even our police department, you know, they need to find a person in Stockholm. I mean, I think most of them are here, and then they are just taking care of all the Nordics. But they don't know the circumstances. They don't know the language. As far as I have been told, they are mainly like, you know, their surveillance about, you know, prior to elections and so forth is mainly in English. I mean, they are not looking into the languages and they don't know the context because they don't even have an office there. So this is also something that is that's it's a risk, because we are very vulnerable, and I believe that it's the same with some of the other Nordic countries, that they don't have the offices either. So looking at the Nordics as a big united region can be good, but then we have also, of course, specific challenges that need to be looked upon, and that's where the tech companies are completely failing.
Yeah. I think Mary had a comment.
Yeah, just wanted to comment on your last point there, because even if the tech companies has an office, they often do not have anything to say, and they cannot answer any questions, and they forward you to somewhere else where you don't have the answer. So even though you have an office in your country, that might not help you so much, but it really illustrates the problem. It's very difficult to get hold on someone that has a responsibility and can give you an answer or can do something. And we know from Norway that this is also a problem that the media also experience. For example, if someone has taken down an article and they want to do something about that, it's hard to get in touch with someone. So this is something also that the media has brought up as a problem. I just also wanted to add something positive about cooperation on the Nordic level, because I think we see all that this is getting more and more important at our level, for example, in between authorities. In between the Nordic media authorities, we have been having a good cooperation over a long time, even though it's not been, you know, very formal, but we have had meetings every year. We also meet each other in European context, and knowing each other and knowing about challenges in the different countries, how we solve things, that is very useful. And I think that now we need to work even more closely with the ASA and everything, but just knowing each other from before, having trust in each other, knowing each other, who to get in touch with.
Yeah.
That will also make it much easier now when we have to strengthen that cooperation. So at least we're not starting from scratch.
Can I
Sure.
add on a positive note as well? Yes, and especially if with the smaller countries like Iceland, with a very small population, it is extremely important, you know, this Nordic cooperation, and also because the larger Nordic countries are really willing to you know, have all the support that is needed. So, for example, just to mention one thing that was like a little Nordic, or at least Nordic Icelandic project, was that the disinformation campaign in COVID. We were just within 2 months, we had copied the Norwegian one, and we had, made it in Iceland, and there was like 40% of the nation who saw it. So that is, something that, a tangible thing that was an outcome.
So there's some glimmer of hope, which
Yes.
is always nice when we're talking about policy and not going to the gloom and doom. But going, for example, a few of the problems that Thijs outlined in, for example, finding jurisdiction, right, within a country. Imagine in terms of the Nordics. So how do you see trying to overcome that challenge at a Nordic perspective?
That's a really good question. Really big. I think that an initial thought would be to use the existing structures that we already have. So something like Nordic Council would be really good. You said you already had cooperation among media authorities. Would be very interesting to see if we could, again, talking about copying something that already works, copy that to data protection authorities or business authorities or something like that. So I think that I would definitely look to the Nordics to achieve that. And I would do it through existing structures. And I think if I can elaborate a little bit on it, I think that we are also standing in front of certain challenges where we have to be really, really thoughtful. And I see that the use of generative AI in government is a big key thing here, because right now we're at sort of an arms race, and that, at least what I see, that government authorities are trying to see who can use generative AI first and be first mover and automate all these processes. And what I fear is the fact that there's a too large emphasis on speed and efficiency straight away, that they will just go, okay, then we'll sign up for OpenAI and put everything we do in that, rather than taking a step back, looking at existing open source models we have in Europe. We have Mistral from France that have put out a smaller large language model, but performs better than any other of that size, which can then potentially be hosted locally in Europe, in European data centers. So I think it's very important that now we are at a crossroads with this huge technological revolution, and that we don't make the same mistakes as we did when we started to digitize the public sector, when we were starting building websites and apps and not thinking about the infrastructure that was underlying. So I think that generative AI is perhaps a good case to start with, and really learn from each other.
But this is a very good point, like this meshedness of these actors and the infrastructure itself in the whole, what we would call like infrastructures of democracy. Would you see, how powerful do you think that they are, and how much do you think that there are avenues for including them into this policy making?
I think that they are really powerful, as documented by Sina and Sophie early on right now. I think we cannot deny it when we have documentation that they're involved in everything from website buildups, app buildups, cloud services, and sea cables. I would say that I hope that we are starting to get aware of it, that this kind of research will sort of make an impact on, of course it's already making an impact on us as regulators, but also starting to make an impact on a political level, because then we will still be dependent on them, because a lot of the services they provide are cheap and efficient. But I think when the policymakers start to realize that there's an alternative to these things, then we can start to talk about the dependency or how powerful they are, because they're really powerful right now. But I do think we have the opportunity to make it otherwise. I don't think, even though that I will say that things we've been talking about, it looks pretty dark, and I would happy that we had some positive points as well. But I do think that there are opportunities that we have to take, and then again, if we take it collectively, I think we'll be much more successful.